G'day guys, welcome back to Oceania. We've got a few problems. Some are citywide and got to do with services. Others are purely cosmetic, I can live with these. Then there's a couple of, it's like, I don't really know what it's like. And then in terms of traffic, you know what? It's not too bad. I've seen a lot worse. Except for one particular spot. The stretch of Freeway at Matilda Point, it's bad. It's really bad. We've got the classic cars disappearing, service vehicles not reaching their destination, industry suffering. But not just that, it just looks terrible. I hate it down here. So today, we are going to make this stretch of Freeway so much worse. Yeah, worse. Because let's be real, I don't have the greatest track record when it comes to traffic fixes, but I do know how to fix this traffic situation. Better timed traffic lights on this intersection, a sneaker ramp a little bit further on down the freeway, and you know what, mate? That would be it. But that's not what I want to do. Because unfortunately for the civilians of Matilda Point, this stretch of freeway is inspired, and I say that so loosely, by the Ringa Freeway in North Sydney. This is 4 kilometers of far too many lanes, overly complicated, always under construction, far too confusing freeway. This source of inspiration comes fresh off a recent trip I just made just yesterday. Heading towards Taronga Zoo, a trip I've made many times before, I missed my turnoff because the road was under construction. I then couldn't get off the freeway because there's like a million lanes to cross. So I crossed the harbour bridge, got tolled, U-turned in the CBD, crossed back over the bridge, tolled again, and then made it to Taronga Zoo 30 minutes late. So I hate this freeway, it sucks, but I'm gonna build it anyway. I'm gonna build it because I wanna see whether or not adding extra lanes is truly gonna help us out. I wanna make this thing overly complicated, over-engineered, just a big old slab of concrete in the middle of the city. It's gonna be glorious. But will it actually solve anything? That's the question. And I know what you might be thinking, you're just frustrated, you had a bad experience, and now you're taking it out on a video game. Yeah, and you might say that. I guess you might say that. Before we start working on the intersection, let's first analyze the situation. What exactly is happening down here? Unsurprisingly, the majority of the traffic is stretching from Dundee, crossing the bridge, and then making the right turn into the CBD of Matilda Point. And that's where we're getting stuck, that right-hand turn. The majority of the traffic is in fact delivery vans and trucks making those deliveries into the city. But then we've also got a fair share of taxis, which then leads me to the question, what's going on with the public transport? In typical bus fashion, yeah, this thing's stuck in traffic. No surprises there. So a dedicated bus lane would be very helpful in this situation. And he's not exactly making his money's worth with just 3 passengers. Not that I want these things filled to the gills, but I do want a few more passengers on this. Within the CBD of Matilda Point, we do have a pretty substantial transport hub connecting buses and trains and even a short walk to the ferry terminal. It's a pretty happening place, except it's not that happening at the moment. Yeah, there's a few people, but it could be better. So with all that in mind, I figured it'd probably be a good idea to start with the public transport. Make some improvements here, and then we'll get to the intersection. I started with the buses, reducing the amount of vehicles I had on the roads. They're just clogging up the streets, and then replacing them with some high capacity vehicles. Just a couple of quick, easy fixes for now, but we're gonna get a little bit more into the buses a bit later on in this episode. And then it was time for the trains. And boy oh boy, did I slip down a bit of a rabbit hole, because the trains were a little bit of a mess, and I needed to definitely clean them up, choosing the right types of vehicles for the right jobs, making sure that we had the right amount of trains on the train lines that were connecting up people to the right places. I had a really good look at the ridership, making sure that we stayed within the realm of possibilities, making sure that there were enough trains to get people to places in a pretty timely fashion, but then also making it so that it felt a little bit more realistic for some of the areas, such as Patterson, just the one train going out there. It's a country town. We don't have that many trains going out there connecting it up to Dundee. And even the little town that Dirty H built, just the one train will do. And then the multi-platform station at Chester Hill, yeah, a lot of trains are serving this area, a lot of people are catching the train from here. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I need multiple trains or more than 2 trains on the one line, because so many lines cross this area. So just reducing some of the numbers of trains hitting up this station. And then the last thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to go through and change the names of these lines so I could clearly see which lines were connecting up which regions. I could check out the ridership and how many trains we had on each one. And this was going to be really useful down the track when I needed to make some simple changes or extending out the lines ever so slightly. This is going to be something that's going to be very useful in the next episode, but more on that later. Now, public transport is all well and good, but we had a monstrosity to build. So it's time to get to work and figure out what the timed traffic lights down here could potentially look like. Now I say could because this is going to change so much over the course of this episode. The general shape of it will pretty much stay the same, but we're going to be adding in so many extra lanes and so many different extra rules. Just what I'm doing down here, pairing up some of these intersections so that when we've got green lights on one spot, the lanes can easily merge into the next intersection. This is always really tricky and I always have a really hard time figuring out which lane I am giving the green light for. Unfortunately for me, this is about as easy as this intersection's gonna get. It's only more complicated from here on out. I decided to press on with Traffic Manager. Feeling somewhat successful with that timed traffic light, I decided to pair up a couple of these lanes, making it so that vehicles needed to be in the right lane way early on, just to clear up a little bit of that traffic. This is pretty similar to the Ringer Freeway. You gotta be in the right lane at the right time, well and truly in advance, otherwise you're gonna end up in the wrong place. Which is exactly what happened to me. Now lucky for this situation, everyone's just a bunch of ones and zeros, which means that everyone is in the right lane at the right time, there's no room for human error, unlike me. So implementing confusing lanes is nothing but a thing if you're just a computer. So, unsurprisingly, this seems to work an absolute treat, and I am so happy to see that the traffic situation is already completely solved. I guess I'm better at traffic fixes than I gave myself credit for. Oopsie daisy. For some reason, we had cars just piling up in this one area. I didn't really know what was going on, until I realized that we had an invisible car that was somehow stuck here. No matter how many times I tried to click on it, or trying to remove all vehicles using Traffic Manager, it just would not disappear. This was gonna cause some serious issues. I was feeling a little bit stuck with this, until I realized that, well, how about I just treat it as a broken down vehicle, and instead of using that lane, we'll just bypass it. So that's what we did. I made it so that vehicles would have to merge into the lane on the left, and of course, this isn't exactly ideal, but it is pretty realistic. Roadworks and breakdowns are very problematic, and luckily we do have quite a lot of lanes that people can choose from, so that's been a little bit of a bonus. But I decided to detail it up with just some very simple props, and hopefully that vehicle will just disappear after a little while. We can maybe open that lane up eventually, but we'll just see what happens with that one. With traffic flowing fairly decently now, it was time to get back to our intersection. I wanted there to be a lot of lanes in this thing. Now typically in City Skylines, adding extra lanes doesn't really solve a lot of situations. It doesn't solve a lot of problems. Particularly if you're using vanilla City Skylines, then you don't really have a huge amount of control. But when you've got a couple of extra mods, when you're playing with Traffic Manager, President Edition mods, then yeah, you do have a lot more control when it comes to traffic. But not just that, I think it's also the way that you encourage vehicles to go in different directions of your city. So we are adding in extra lanes, and it's only going to get a little more extra. Because like I mentioned before, I would like this to be very much an over-engineered, very complicated, and just way too over the top intersection. I'm basing this off the one that I totally missed on the way to Taronga Zoo. Because there was roadworks, it did mean that I wasn't able to merge lanes where I usually merge, and I guess that's something that I need to remember now because that's probably going to stay like that for quite a long time. But this is just a little bit complicated because you have to get into the lane super early, and when I turn onto the freeway, then I have to be pretty rapid fire to even make it in the first place. In fact, it's pretty stressful no matter the exits you're trying to take, because basically if you don't take the right one, then you are more than likely going to end up in the city, which is always going to be expensive. It always adds like 20 minutes to your trip, so it's always a little bit tricky to manage. So you know what, we're going to do the same thing here. I wanted it to be pretty complicated and stressful. I can always appreciate bus lanes in places like this, just separating those big chunky buses from regular traffic and just making it so that they can just skip some of these traffic queues. I always think this is a great idea. However, it does make things a little bit more stressful because, I don't know, sometimes you just end up in a bus lane by accident. And seeing as they're trying to improve traffic flow, public transport, but then also make things a little bit more stressful, then bus lanes is something we definitely need around here. I had a great vision of having a dedicated bus lane on this freeway. However, when I went to convert it, I am of course not using the vanilla roads, which is going to be quite problematic. I honestly didn't really know how to solve this problem at this stage, so I just kind of left it, but we are going to fix this. And you know what? It's going to be glorious. To my surprise, traffic was flowing pretty well up here. This never works out for me. I am the worst with timed traffic lights, so seeing this just work, lovely. I decided to celebrate by adding in a couple of little details, putting in this retaining wall network just to hide a little bit of the mantle that was poking through. I really like that this whole area has this elevated sunken in effect that still fits in with the contour of the land, but it is still elevated above the highway. Kinda looks cool. I then wanted to add in some trees. Thinking about what sort of trees would be in an area like this, you're gonna have a couple of larger ones poking through, ones that have been established for quite some time, and the freeway has just sort of been built around them. But then you've also got these trees that have been planted as a bit of a noise buffer, which is something that is purely aesthetic in City Skylines 1, but I'm pretty sure they've announced it for City Skylines 2, which is pretty exciting. But regardless, this is something that you'll see in real life, and it is also a great way to block off a bit of the highway from the general public. But I'm also adding in quite a lot of small bushes. This is something that adds in so much detail. It's one of those things that when you're adding in those big trees and things look a little bit unrealistic, just try adding in a good variety of different sized bushes and trees and medium-sized ones. You know, just a bit of a mixed bag, makes things feel a little bit more realistic. And with all those changes, as you can see, we have vastly improved the performance of this intersection. The traffic flow is way better down here now. But unfortunately, I said I was going to make this worse before I made it better. So let's make it worse. We're going to increase the demand for Matilda Point, increasing the population, workers, industry, businesses, tourists, the lot of it. It's all getting a big boost. And this should put a pretty big strain on our freeway, but we'll get back to that a little later on. I wanted to start by using the Plopple mod just to change some of the properties of these buildings, going through and making it so that they're no longer unique buildings. They're now massive office blocks and also holding quite a lot of residents. Some of these buildings are holding hundreds of people now, so that should put a bit of a strain on things. But Matilda Point has also looked fairly rough around the edges for far too long. We've got a lot of just vanilla buildings that have just spawned because I just pretty much zoned and forgot about it. And we got some pretty ugly buildings. So I want to go through and add in some more Australian specific buildings. So you might recognize, if you are Australian, you might recognize quite a lot of these buildings because a lot of Australian buildings have popped up on the Steam Workshop recently. We have been very spoiled, to be honest. I feel like we are probably one of the greatest represented countries on the Steam Workshop. There are so many Australian assets, so it's awesome to see so many, and so many still being added, even though we've got City Skylines 2 just around the corner. So I wanted to place a whole bunch of them. This whole area, Matilda Point, is inspired by North Sydney, just outside of Sydney. I mean, I guess it's still part of Sydney, but just outside of the CBD on the other side of the bridge. This area is pretty cool, and I really wanted to just place down a whole bunch of different types of commercial buildings and offices, but then also some high density apartment blocks that can hold quite a lot of people because it's a pretty high density area. A lot of people live around here, so I kind of want to do the same thing around Matilda Point. With some pretty low effort detailing, pretty much just placing down some trees to cover up some imperfections. I then wanted to just relocate a little bit of the industry so that we had a little bit more space to extend out our parkland. I wanted to add in a football field and just sort of extend this area so that we were attracting more tourists, but then also providing a little bit more land value because this area is, well, it is lacking quite a bit of land value, and we also needed just to spruce up the place a little bit more. We didn't really have that many parks around, and I wanted an excuse to place down this football field, but then also placing in a couple of tennis courts too, just spliced right next to that train line, which, you know, we might even have a little play with in the next episode. But as you probably guess, after doing a little bit of work on that side of the freeway, yeah, I kind of felt myself being drawn to work on some other areas. Yep, I'm officially snowballing. This side of Matilda Point has looked very, very average. Beautiful looking houses, but just not placed down properly. These have just been spawned and grown all over the place with just some weird things going on with the terrain. This would look okay if it wasn't in such a high density area, but in an area like this is no good. Again, taking inspiration from North Sydney, but then also Kirribilli and all this area around here in Sydney. It's a real mixed bag in terms of density, a lot of medium density with duplexes and terraces and apartments, but then we've also got quite a lot of single family housing and then some high density too. A lot of people want to live around here and it really shows. It's a lovely place to live. So this high density, this is really just going to sit kind of close to the CBD of Matilda Point, a little bit closer to the water edge and Dundee, but as we get a little bit further out, a little bit more past that interchange, we are going to be having more inspiration taken from the other side of the bay in Auckland, which is a little bit more low density. We've also got these excellent New Zealand houses that I would like to be using a little bit more of, which were already over here, but I am going to be using them a little bit more sparingly because they are a little bit more historical, and I think I would like to really showcase them in different areas. So I am leaving like some parts of that type of architecture around this area, but I am also splicing it in with some more high density, just so we can have a bit of a mix going on. Plus, adding in a bit of extra demand for the area. I want to see more people around here. Whenever I create a new neighborhood, I always try to center it around some sort of commercial district. I know we've got the CBD of Matilda Point pretty close by, but I just think it just creates a little bit more realism. Plus, it's also a nice way to show that the neighborhood is sort of centered around something that brings people together. So this will be a place where I should probably include some sort of school and some sort of recreation, and also maybe even some services. But with Matilda Point so close, this is kind of just dwindled down to more of just a simple shopping district, with just some cafes and maybe just a little grocer, and that's about it. But you can see there's quite a lot of density around here, and it's causing all sorts of craziness with the landscape because it is, well, it's pretty crazy around here. Matilda Point is a very hilly place, but we'll fix all that up very shortly. But I just want to continue by placing out some more buildings, some more houses. As you can see, we are really just splicing quite a lot of different types of zoning. We've got a lot of high density and a lot of single family, including quite a lot of those New Zealand mansion houses, which I think look so nice around here. Just kind of gives this whole area a bit of, I don't know, a bit more of a historical sense to it all. Like I said earlier, we've got a lot of great new Australian assets on the Steam Workshop, but a couple of them are just a little bit bright. So I have to go through and just make sure that the colors are just a little bit more toned down. It's a little bit tedious, but I think it's worth it in the long run because these do look so fantastic. But with the buildings now down, as you can see, we've got just a few little bits of craziness going on. The terrain is just making things look a little bit strange. Well, you know what time it is. It's time to cover up these imperfections with some trees. This will always be my favorite step. It's really just such an easy thing to do, and of course, yeah, these imperfections are still here. You can still see a lot of them poking through, but I just think that an area like this, that we're mostly just gonna be flying around and just getting a good sense of how it all feels, rather than going into the nitty-gritty of the details, I just think that adding in these trees just changes things so much. But as you can see, Matilda Point is really starting to flesh out. I am so happy with how this area is starting to look. And with that, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in to today's episode of Oceania. I think we did a really good job at fleshing out Matilda Point. I think it's starting to look really nice and complete. And, wait, hold on a second. Oops. Weren't we meant to be working on the freeway? Well, after that 5-hour sidetrack, I was pretty successful in bumping up the population and the work demand. And it was really showing on the freeway. It was looking pretty busy down here now. And to be honest, it's only going to get worse after the next episode. I got back to my time traffic lights, just fixing up and fine-tuning a couple of bits and pieces that were bothering me. But to be honest, there was an overarching problem, something that just was not sitting well. It wasn't the time traffic lights, it wasn't the fact that traffic wasn't really flowing that well, it was the fact that it just wasn't complicated enough. I needed to throw just a couple of extra layers into the mix. These extra layers, they come in the form of a dedicated bus lane and also a off-ramp that's going to connect up to the intersection on the left-hand side. This one's for people who are living in this residential area. You won't be able to turn right from this spot. But the bus lane, like I said before, I really wanted to have a dedicated bus lane, but I was a little bit confused as to how I was going to do it because we couldn't really fit in the one that is part of the vanilla game, you know, just the base game. It's not even base game, I think it was introduced only recently, but it's this great network that's all part of the Freeway, which I did want to include, but I didn't really know how I was going to do it. But then I remembered that you can do a couple little tricks using Traffic Manager, but then also the intersection marking tool, which we'll do very shortly. But for now, we are still just working on this little off-ramp, which was proving to be a little bit difficult. I've been working in Sunset City for far too long now, and yeah, we've got a nice flat flat land on that one, but for this, we do not. It's very hilly and very all over the place. So making this work was a little bit tricky. We are also working in very limited space. This is not a large area, so we're trying to make it work, but eventually we did get there, and I kind of like that it is in a very limited amount of space because, well, it kind of matches what this area would have been like as well. I mean, squeezing an intersection like this would have been pretty hard, just like it was very difficult for me too. It would have been really hard to squeeze this into some historical buildings and making it work around the pre-existing layout of the city. But as you can see, things are starting to get a little bit complicated up here, not just the way that it looks, but also with my brain. It's really hard to figure out which lanes to connect up and which traffic lights to turn on. And there's about 4, I think it might even be 5 intersections here that I need to pair up with the traffic lights, which just was causing a real headache. But I have to admit, I did get there in the end. It's a little bit wonky in places, it still needs a little bit of work, but it actually kind of works. But what about that dedicated bus lane they keep on harping on about? Well, something I always forget about is that you don't necessarily need a dedicated bus network. Instead, you can use a couple of mods. I'm using intersection marking tool to change the color of my road, and then I'm using the traffic manager mod to basically ban all traffic except for buses on this network. I've also gone through and I've banned buses on all the other networks where I don't want them to go, just so I can influence them to go on this one network. Something I'm also going to do is I'm not going to put the dedicated bus lane on the entire freeway. I'm only going to put it onto certain spots. And I guess these spots are going to be where it matters the most. Places where you might get a lot more traffic, you might, really need those dedicated bus lanes. And I think if we get super traffic later on down the track, then yeah, I think we might add some extra ones. But for now, I think that we only really need it in certain parts where we're going to have the most amount of traffic. This is also something that I noticed on the Ringer Freeway. You've only really got these lanes in certain areas. Obviously more places than I do, but I think I might add them later on. We'll see how we go. I'm also copying the double bus lane from this intersection. This is overkill because I don't think we really need it. I mean, they're essentially going into the one lane anyway, but I'm just gonna do it anyway. With the added infrastructure for buses, I figured we should probably encourage some more to be taking this route. We didn't really have a huge amount at this stage. I felt like we could definitely improve things, the connectivity to Matilda Point and Dundee, so I decided to spend a little bit of time just mapping out the layout of the bus network, really encouraging them to go along this route that is more for buses, where we got more bus infrastructure, and just going to places that were really badly connected. Because I also want to improve the ridership and see more people on these things, so really connecting them up to the transport hubs and the little places that don't really have much public transport. And while we waited for the buses to start their rounds, I needed to make just a couple of extra modifications to the freeway. Number one, I wanted to make things just ever so slightly more annoying, but then I also wanted to change where this ramp sat, because this pretty much made it so that you had no way of going beyond this intersection, because as soon as you jumped on the freeway, you were pretty much in the lane to turn left to pretty much jump off the freeway once again. So it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense. If you are jumping on the freeway, then you are most probably leaving the city. So I needed to make it so that that lane connected up to the lanes that were en route to be leaving the city. So I decided to just make a little bit of extra space to then put the ramp to go in the middle of the freeway. And I have to admit, at this stage, we don't have a huge amount of demand for an on-ramp just here, but I think that's going to change over the next couple of weeks. So we're just going to pop it in and we'll just see what happens down the track. You might also be wondering, where did that roadworks go? Well, I ended up deleting it because that vehicle became unstuck, which is, I don't know what happened there, but I'm so glad it's gone because that was causing a bit of a headache. But as you can see, I'm trying to weave in this ramp. It's still very, very tight, and I'm having to play with no controller quite a lot. Thank God for no controller, because this is really helping out when it comes to just squeezing this into the right spot. What I really like about this is that if you are turning right into Matilda Point, then you need to jump into that right lane really quick, pretty much as soon as you leave the Anzac Bridge, because there is a barrier there that pretty much prevents anybody else from jumping in that lane. So you have to decide very early on, you need to know exactly what you are doing, which is what always gets me stuck going on the Ringer Freeway. So I connected up the lanes using Traffic Manager just to prevent people from making any last minute decisions. And then I use intersection marking tool just to connect up some of the line work because, well, this is pretty much how it's going to look. I mean, we are at 25 minutes now, and yeah, we are finally getting to the stages where we can make the final markings on the roads to get a good idea of how everything is going to look. But you might be wondering, what about all those barriers that you complained about? You know, there's barriers that prevent you from changing lanes and making it so that you need to decide which lane you're going to be in, and if you don't decide, then you're pretty much stuffed. Well, after all these years of playing City Skylines and all these different mods that I've been using, I discovered a new feature of intersection marking tool, and I believe it's the network, I don't know what it is, network multi-tool, I don't know what it is. But I discovered this new thing that it was all part of this collection that Cluse has got, and you can pretty much use the intersection marking tool, and instead of a line that you're placing down, you're placing instead a barrier. And you can choose between a whole bunch of different networks. It's insane. I know I'm late to the party here, but far out, this is so cool. I wish I knew about this earlier, but I'm gonna be using this a little bit more in this episode. Yeah, we're not finished yet. If adding in trees to a new neighborhood in City Skylines is one of my favorite steps of building a new neighborhood, then I would say that adding in the line work to a road is probably my favorite step of any sort of intersection or road build that I do, because it is just so satisfying to see just the realism that is just achieved when you add in this line work. I really hope that we get some sort of intersection marking tool when it comes to City Skylines 2, because I think there's always going to be room for extra detail work and just making things just splice together like this. Oh man, this is just so satisfying, particularly when you start putting in some lines that, you know, define where bus lanes are, and just some very simple ones, such as just showing where traffic is meant to go when you turn into an intersection. I always keep it fairly basic. Some people get pretty technical when it comes to stuff like this, but I was happy with just the line work that I did just here. Now, as you can see, the intersection is working pretty well. It's probably not absolutely perfect. Making that U-turn is probably not the best solution for that, but I also don't really mind it that much. I can totally live with that, because things were flowing pretty well, and I think it's going to get crazier and crazier as time goes on, as places develop up a little bit more around Matilda Point. One of the last little bits of detail on the freeway was just a sound barrier. Of course, this doesn't do anything, it's just for looks, but I think it is very important in terms of the realism of this area. But something that is absolutely practical, something we definitely needed, was a footbridge that connected up the two parts of the neighborhood, because, well, people can't really cross the freeway. I've also banned pedestrian traffic on the bridge, so this is pretty much the only way that people can make it across this freeway, which is always problematic for pedestrians. But I think that this works really well. You're going to see quite a lot of people using it, because it does connect up to a little alleyway on the right-hand side, as well as on the left, right to the commercial little strip that we have. So a lot of people are going to be using it, and I would actually like to work a little bit better on making it so that it connects up a bit better to Dundee, because that's not really that connected up for foot traffic or for bike traffic. But I did want to try and make it so that we could get bikes to go along this area, but I actually think with that little alleyway, that would also be dedicated for bikes as well. But we'll work on that a little bit later on. A couple of better placed lampposts and some billboards just to polish up the final stages of the build. But guys, it's not just the way it looks, it is the way it functions. And on that, how well does it function? Well, my friends, thank you all so much for watching today's episode of Oceania. Yes, Oceania, it's back. It's been like 6 months. It's been ages. I'm sorry for the hold up. It is a little bit clunky. As you can tell, we've got quite a lot of problems around the city, around the map. I've spent quite a long time just making this thing work. And as you can see, there's a lot of things I had to polish up and fix around the city just to get it up to speed. How long is it going to be back for? Who knows? City Skylines 2 is just around the corner. There's still so much I want to build in Oceania. There's still so much I want to do in Sunset City. It's very tricky to manage my time, but I can say that there are quite a few things that I still want to build in Oceania. Maybe I'll touch on that a little bit later on, but we will have another episode next week, and there is a pretty big, very ambitious, silly idea that I want to work on that is out of the city. So have a little bit of a speculate about that. I'm still trying to figure out whether or not I'm going to be working on Oceania and Sunset City episodes when City Skylines 2 comes out. Would you still watch them? That's the real question. Because we are definitely not going to get Australian assets and even assets based in Miami for a very long time in City Skylines 2. To get the catalogue that we have right now, yeah, it's going to take a while. So part of me kind of thinks we might still be chipping away at some stuff, but then who knows? A really big thanks to all the people who've been helping out getting Oceania up and running again. We've had a lot of problems, so thank you guys so much for all the people who've been chipping in and just giving some solid advice. Really, really appreciate it. And a massive thank you to all my patrons for your support over on Patreon. Mr. Meth, Cosmin Penate, Peter Deggs, Leslie Ritchie, Lexington Griffith, Charlie Zane, Maximilian, Xavier Chung, Sully, Kevin Thompson, Matthias Winkelhausen, Robin Regals, Vivid Swing, and Pablo Hernandez. Cheers, legends. Catch you all in the next one. See ya.